And we are live. I'm here with my new friend Aaron. How you doing?
Good, David. How you doing?
Very well. You're in New York. I'm in Montreal. I feel like we're brothers practically.
We're on the East Coast. We all got the winter going on right now.
East
So,
Coast vibes. How do you do the finger thing? East Coast? I don't know how to. Anyway, my rapping days are long behind me. So I want to hear all about you, and I'm excited about your project that you have with your partner there. I was just a little bit disappointed that he didn't show up here, but hopefully we'll get him on. But today it's going to be all about you. So I want you to go all the way back to your childhood. Tell us about how you were raised. I got a sneaking suspicion that you were raised in a religious home, a Jewish home. I'm just throwing it out there. That's my intuition. Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong and walk me through the journey. What was it like as a very, very young child discovering that there's a God and that God loves you and that you have to serve him and all those sorts of things? Walk us through the whole journey, please.
okay, from the childhood, huh? That's an interesting question, David. Okay, it's a pleasure to be on. It's a pleasure to be on. My childhood, well, I was born in Denver, Colorado.
Ah.
That's why I'm a big Bronco fan. Um, when I was 3.5, we moved to New York. I was raised in a modern Orthodox Jewish home. Um, we lived in Queens after that. So modern Orthodoxy in Judaism, it's really it's committed to Judaism and the laws of Jewish observance, and obviously belief in God, the philosophical tenets of Judaism. But it's also within the modern world. It's not what like would be called the ultra Orthodox, which is more of like an insular.
With the things.
Yeah, that would be one version of ultra orthodoxy. In a certain sense, it's like more insulating themselves from influences of the modern world. Just modernity is very corrosive to religion. Certainly, since the Enlightenment, there's all these conflicts between religion and modernity, coming from science and philosophy, culture, the whole broad spectrum. But modern Orthodox Jews, we try to live within the modern world and be able to confront the modern world with Jewish values that come from the Torah. That's what we study, what we call the Bible and the oral law. And we use those to develop a way of life and a system of thinking that enables us to thrive in the modern world, and that's modern orthodoxy. Um, I studied in Israel for a year, and in year 2000, I'm 41 years old. A year and a half actually, I studied in Israel, and then I came back. I went to Queens College, and I got a physics degree. I had to decide what I wanted to do with my life. At that point, I was studying in what we call a yeshiva. It's a place for the advanced study of the Talmud. Are you familiar with the Talmud?
A little bit, yeah. I just purchased it for my Kindle the other day, the Babylonian
Yeah.
Talmud, 20 volumes, I think it is.
Okay. Yeah. Did you get with the English translation, like the Art Scroll, or no? Just
Yeah,
the.
yeah, 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 of course. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was all English and there was no Hebrew in it whatsoever as far as I know.
Okay. I hear that. So I've been studying Talmud for pretty intensely with what's called the advanced. It's called the Brisker methodology. It was developed by somebody called Chaim Brisker about let's say around 150 years ago. I mean, it was always the way Jews learned, but he's the one who really formulated the categorical analytical methodology in order to teach it to students. It's really a way of thinking applied specifically to the Talmud and Jewish law, but it's really a generic way of categorical analytical thinking that you can really use for all areas of life. So I was studying in the yeshiva, studying Talmud, where that part I've been doing that more or less continuously for the past 20 years or so. But at that point in my life, I was in college. This is in the early 2000s. I had to figure out what I wanted to do to earn a living. So I had a choice either going into physics, some area of physics, maybe either, getting a PhD, becoming a professor or research, things like that. But I had really like so many interests. I love philosophy. I like other areas of science, biology. I like economics. I'm very interested in psychology. So I didn't really want to become like a professional physicist and have to choose a specific discipline.
Mm.
So I basically chose to go into commodity trading, where I for the first year I traded on the floor of the exchange in New York, the financial district. I traded in the cotton pits. I don't know if you know what it used to look like. Okay, there's like it really used to be,
Like in the movies, like in the movies there.
like in the movies, yeah, like literally people in circles, circles trading with each other, buy, sell, bidding prices. And I was a local in the pit, a middleman kind of, buying and selling cotton. And then I went to sugar. I traded a little coffee. And then I was able to, it was just around the beginning of when the commodity exchanges were going electronic and were going online. So I started trading silver, like precious metals at night. Oh, in the overnight. First, it was only in the overnights. So I traded silver in the overnights. And then I basically switched to trading the NYMEX, which is crude oil and gasoline and heating oil. It's called the crack spread between crude oil and gasoline and heat. I was a crack trader, everybody, my friends love that. And I did that in natural gas for about 10 years, trading electronically at home. And that was really like the golden era of electronic trading as eventually banks started going into it and hedge funds. And because obviously there's a lot of money in commodities trading, and it became almost impossible to compete with them. They're very sophisticated. I'm sure AI is involved now. It's completely, I wouldn't say impossible. I'm sure humans are still doing it on some level. But I was fortunate. I was able to come in the golden era, and I was able to do it for another 10 years. So I was able to retire about about 6 years ago. And now basically I study Talmud most of my time, and physics and philosophy and psychology and all these different areas. I'm able to really have time. So I really just, I like hanging out with my friends and discussing things, but I'm kind of like an intellectual, where I study and I think and I learn and I do all these things. I have time to do that because I was able to make money in commodities.
How did you meet Elie?
Elie and I have been, we've been learning together for, I don't know, okay, over 20 years now. I was actually best friends with his brother in high school. Elie's a few years older than me. I'm also still best friends with his brother. And I also learned with his brother. Like we learn in Jews, like part of the idea of Judaism really is the idea of learning partners. It's much easier to study an area if you do it with somebody else, because you have somebody to bounce ideas off of, or if you're a little bit too attached to your own idea, somebody else is there to give you a little, break you down a little bit, to show you, and then somebody else's different perspective, and it really helps the development of ideas when you have somebody to learn with. So I learn with different people throughout my day, and one of them is Elie. I learn with him for a few hours every day for over 20 years now. Again, it's mostly Talmud. Now we have our podcast, Physics to God, which I guess I'm sure we'll discuss more of. So we spend some of our time learning Talmud and some of our time working on the podcast, developing the ideas. We've been, working on, Elie and I started writing a book that still has yet published. We started writing it, 12 years ago. We started a blog, actually. It's funny. We started the blog really on Talmud, developing the methodology, teaching how to learn Talmud with an analytical method. Because it's so key to know how to think properly in order to succeed in life. So I was able to use, for example, the Brisker methodology for Gemara, for Talmud. I was able to use that to trade commodities. That's how I did. I used the categorical analytical thinking to interpret the markets and figure out relationships and patterns that I used from the Talmud, and I applied it to markets and trading. And that's how I was able to one of the main reasons I was able to be successful was using that methodology of learning Talmud, applying it to finance. And then I applied it to physics. It's a different way. I shouldn't say it's a different way of thinking. It's really just a categorical, clear way of thinking and analyzing something. Conceptual helps you conceptualize an area. So we did it for physics and philosophy, and we developed. I realized. I realized that maybe this is about 15 years ago. I read a book in physics by Elie which discussed something called the constants of nature. These numbers in nature, which are fine-tuned, specific quantities of like how heavy an electron is, or things of that nature. And I realized like this is an unbelievable argument to show that God exists. See, I'd always been trying to integrate both science and philosophy together with religion and the idea of God together. Like I said, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and in a certain sense, there's this tension in the modern world between religion and between science. And I'd always been trying to integrate those two and to unify those two. And I read this book, and I realized that the physicists were talking about this incredible argument that very clearly to me pointed towards God. And the physicists themselves say, wow, this seems to point to a God, but obviously that's impossible. So they give a different argument, which maybe we'll discuss later. So I went to Elie. I was very close with Elie. I'm like, this is incredible. You got to look at this thing. This is amazing. Like this is the best proof I've ever seen for God. I heard a lot of the classic arguments in philosophy and in science, and they're not that compelling. The older arguments from science didn't work as well, obviously, in modern physics. The Aristotelian proofs obviously are no longer really relevant because of inertia, things like that. But here was an argument from modern physics that really pointed to the existence of God in a much better than anything else. So Elie told me, why don't you just try to give it over? So I got a bunch of guys together, gave over a class. I recorded it, whatever, but this is over 15 years ago. And that was it, because it's very hard to convince anybody you're going to prove God. It's just in the modern world, it's accepted by many people that it's impossible to prove God. And by proof, let me just qualify. I mean by proof. Proof means I mean a compelling, rational argument where a reasonable person will accept that God exists. And you live your life based upon that fact that God exists. So it's not an absolute proof like in a mathematical proof or anything like that, but it's to the highest reasonable standard that you can have in this area, where you're willing to lead your life based upon and have the conviction that God exists and God is real. So for a few years, I kind of left it alone. What are you going to do with it? And then I read a book by Martin Rees called Just Six Numbers, another physicist. And I read the book. It was this amazing, again, developing six numbers in the universe that are specifically fine-tuned, that have to be exactly the right way they are, or else the universe doesn't work. You don't get galaxies, you don't get atoms, a whole list of things. If you're interested, listen to the podcast Physics to God. We go through some of that. And I realized, and at the end of the book, he goes through the same thing that all these physicists go through, of like, it would seem to imply that there's some intelligent cause that's, wants the universe to exist in order for it to work. How else do these numbers get to be exactly that way? There's no way you can explain it through the regular paradigm of science. And then he said, well, there's only one other way, and that's the multiverse. And the multiverse, this is the first I'd really heard about the multiverse. It wasn't as popular then at all. Nobody really heard about the multiverse then. He wrote the book 20 years ago. And the multiverse is this theory of infinite number of parallel universes that are unobservable. And that explains the constants. If you believe in that to some degree, there's a lot of criteria that have to be met. But if there's an infinite number of parallel universes that nobody ever can see, but they all have different laws of physics and different values for these constants, there's a different number for each one, then almost all the universes don't have any planets, stars, galaxies, atoms, or life. But one of them does, and we're in the one that has a universe that has galaxies and planets, stars, and intelligent life. So I realized once the scientists were saying multiverse, here's an opening to talk to people. Because how are you going to talk to people and tell them you're going to try to teach them physics and all this stuff? But scientists develop the multiverse. They have videos and articles which prove the multiverse, and they lay out all the physics. And it's like everything is the same between our argument and scientists until you get towards the end when they say, well, there's no other way to explain this except for the multiverse, this infinite number of other universes. And we say, no, there's another way to explain it, that there's an intelligent cause which set those numbers. In a certain sense, scientists did the work for us. They made all the videos beautifully illustrated, and they wrote all the wonderful articles, and they explained the physics in clear ways. And they had the authority. These are the top physicists in the entire world saying all these things. And, I don't have to go around telling people, the laws of physics are fine-tuned and they're designed. Scientists are saying that themselves. The laws of physics are fine-tuned. It's not like it is in biology, in intelligent design and biology. They're arguing within science. The people in intelligent design are saying evolution doesn't explain biology, and then the scientists, the biologists, saying no, it does. It really does. And there's an argument: is evolution a really good theory? So that's like a science. That's like your. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I just realized I left my chicken in the oven. I have to go turn it off, or it's gonna burn. Okay, I'll be right back. Go
ahead, David. Go ahead.
And you can tell some Jewish jokes while I'm gone. Okay, I'll be right back.
I'll pause that way for you, David.
All right, I'm back. Chicken's okay. The chicken's okay. He's not okay. He's dead, but he's
seen better days.
He's seen better days. I don't know if it's kosher or not, but
yeah. Before I go on, is there anything I've discussed that any questions you want to?
Well, I think I missed the. Did you actually tell some jokes while I was away?
I was one, but it wasn't that good.
Oh, okay. That'll be a surprise when I listen back.
That's my joke. That's my joke, David. You'll see it. You'll see when you come back. Go
ahead. So I disagree a little bit that we can't prove the existence of God with mathematical certainty. I think that we can, using causality, and there are many proofs. And I also disagree about Aristotle. I mean, I think it's still relevant. And I think that modern science has rejected two of the causes which are essential. The final cause. Teleology is out the window. It's not in vogue. And what was the other one that they've chucked out? I can't remember off the top of my head. What's that? Formal cause, yeah. Formal cause, yeah. So, I think Aristotle was wrong about a bunch of stuff, and I'm more of a Platonist myself, but, the church that I belong to, the Catholic Church, relies very heavily on, or borrows very heavily from, or has baptized, however you want to look at it, the ideas of Plato and Aristotle and others that followed. So we're not shy, we're not shy in Christianity to look at truth wherever it's found, because all truth is Christian truth. That's from a Christian perspective. You would probably say all truth is Jewish truth, but so I firmly believe that we can know with absolute certainty that God exists, and we can actually know some of his attributes, that he's infinite in every pure perfection, it's better to have than not to have, and these sorts of things. And but that, you probably agree to some extent.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. I'll start with the easier one. Maybe it's just really a question, the mathematical certainty, that question. You see, I think the reason is if you tell people you can prove God with the same mathematical certainty, you can know that if you accept, Euclid's axioms, then you know that the angles of a triangle are 180 degrees. That's really like in a certain sense a logical consequence. If you say that about God, then people just get these skeptical doubts where, how do I know, that I'm not being tricked by Descartes' demons and all that, I'm just the brain in a vat and everything is like this, and everything's just being, I'm just being, tricked by something and my observations aren't really real. I'm just dreaming, things like that. So it's just in order to avoid that crap, not having to deal with the skeptical thing. It's just, you just say to a person that I'm not trying to prove it like mathematical on that level.
Mm.
I'm trying to prove it to the way anything, that you're willing to get on an airplane because you trust that the pilot is a good pilot, and you go to a doctor, so it's however things in your life, and you live your life based upon that. I'm trying to prove God to that level of knowledge, and that's really sufficient for a person. Now, if you want to say I know, Avi, I know problems. It's really to avoid people who have this unreasonable standard of proof, and then they kind of
Yeah, it's an
reject it.
emotional thing. It's an emotional thing. It has very little to do with reason. And I understand and I appreciate your pragmatic approach, which it is. I mean, you like psychology, so you've studied
Right.
the human condition, so you know that. I mean, even if I had a perfectly presented rational argument for anything that someone doesn't want to believe, they're probably not going to believe it. That's just the human nature. And
Right. We live in a postmodern world. I said the modern world. We live in a postmodern world. It's very hard to convince anybody of anything.
yeah.
Um, Pretty much nobody changes their opinion nowadays. We made the podcast Physics to God, even though we know you're not really going to change people's mind. We made it for really at least two classes of people. One is, we want religious people to not have to merely rely on blind faith. We want them to know there's a rational grounding for the existence of God. It's not something you just have to take based upon authority, scriptures, things like that. There is strong, compelling, rational argument that God exists. So we did that for religious people. And really, if you listen to our podcast, it's really, in a certain sense, that we're talking to secular people who are. It's because it's our podcast does not involve religion whatsoever. It doesn't involve any form of
Oh,
religion.
oh yeah.
It's entirely with philosophical, rational science reasoning. So
Oh.
we're really speaking, in a certain sense, to secular people. I know you're just not going to convince an atheist of anything, because it's just, you don't convince people in this world to change sides in a certain sense. But I just want, there are open-minded people, or people who are, it's often teenagers or people in early 20s, who are just looking for the truth. They're investigating, they're trying to find things. And we want them to know that there is a very strong, compelling argument, a proof that God exists from science. And I think it's far better. The argument from physics is far better than any other argument that's out there from science or philosophy. I think it's really much more compelling. I hope you listen to it. You'll see it. It's different. I've seen the other ones, and they're not as good as this one. And that's the reason we've been spending 12 years of our lives writing a book, which we haven't published yet. The podcast is essentially based on the book. But developing the arguments in a clear way, using analogies to explain it to everybody. We just want people to be armed with it, to understand that this is something you can use to bolster your faith, or to just, for somebody who's open-minded, secular, just to realize that this is, the belief in God is not some, it's not some blind faith proposition, or something you don't have to give up your mind to accept God. It's not, you don't have to dichotomize yourself, but you can be a whole person who believes in rationality and still be convinced that God exists. And in fact, the opposite is true. It's these top scientists are literally believing in these infinite number of parallel universes. 20 years ago, before any scientists would not have accepted the multiverse. It's really a wild theory. And it's in a certain sense shocking when we first started telling people this, they did not believe us, that scientists really believed in the multiverse. And the fact that the greatest scientists in the world nowadays believe in parallel universes, it shows you, it really should show you that there is something compelling about this argument, if the alternative is a multiverse. I think that's one of the big things to see. In biology, the alternative theory is evolution, natural selection. Whatever you want to say about that, it's a real scientific theory. Whether it's complete or not is, whatever. But multiverse is not a very good scientific theory. It's a bad philosophy. It's science fiction. And that really can show a person there's something valuable here. And I hope, from the podcast where, our season 1, we gave over the fine-tuning argument. We're working on season 2, which is essentially disproving the multiverse, which, we take it seriously and show it's the 3 premises that it requires in order for it to work, the arguments that scientists try to support it with, and ultimately its logical flaws and why it doesn't work. And we take it seriously, breaking it down in a real logical way.
Yeah, I want to just touch very briefly on evolution because I never believed in evolution. I was atheist 25 years. I still never believed in evolution. Obviously there is change that takes place between parents and offspring, obviously. So I wasn't foolish enough to deny that. But that I evolved from a fish or an ape or whatever. It's like I never believed that, even as an atheist. And now as a Christian, I've got my Catholic dogmas that teach me that irrefutably that it's nonsense. And I studied philosophy as a hobby, and I've got philosophical principles which preclude evolution from lower non-human animals. It's just impossible. I'm sorry if you disagree with me. If you believe in some sort of evolution from apes or whatever, then I hope I'm not offending you. But it's philosophically untenable. It really is because of the principle of proportionate causality. You can't give what you don't have, and so on and so forth. Do you believe in evolution, or do you believe, as most Jews do, in a young universe?
I think with regards to evolution, I think that it's not our axe to grind in order to try to argue against evolution. Um, I think it's I think it's certainly a legitimate scientific theory in its own realm. Whether or not it's comprehensive and complete and can explain everything, for example, the emergence of human beings and the special intellect that human beings have, it's like a different question. If you listen to our episode 6, we call physics versus biology, and we devoted one episode to discussing this question of evolution and the role, the argument of intelligent design from evolution, and comparing it and contrasting it to the argument from physics, fine tuning. And our main point there is like I'm not there's no I don't need to go around. I'm not an expert in biology, and I don't need to go around breaking down people's, what gives them sources of faith, or reconciling biology and evolution with the scriptures. I obviously do think it's reconcilable, but we just show why. Our main point essentially is that if you think the argument from biology to God that there's an intelligent designer for biological life, if you like that argument and you think it's good, you're going to love the argument from physics. It's the argument from physics is superior to that in biology. Like one argument we said was because, again, we're not arguing with scientists about whether evolution is a good scientific theory or not. We're arguing with scientists about a philosophical theory, about a multiverse. It's a completely different type of an argument. Is it really science? It's a completely different thing. Biology is not a fundamental science the way physics is. Physics is dealing with the origin of the universe. We're dealing with um, the origin of the design of the laws themselves, or the fine tuning of the constants of nature. These are the universal principles that are the most basic building blocks of the universe. In fundamental particles like an electron, their intrinsic properties, or the order, the low entropy, the highly ordered initial conditions of the universe. So it's biology, for example. They can attempt to explain it through chemistry, and they have all these different theories. The multi-planet solution. There's trillions of planets out there. Again, I'm not trying to get into it, but there are trillions of planets out there. They can observe that. They can't observe trillions of parallel universes that exist in separate, uncausally connected worlds. It's a completely different argument. It's much more difficult to argue against scientists in biology when there really are these other planets. They could see them with the telescope. You could see these things. But other universes, it's science fiction. That's why I'm just saying I don't need to break down the biology one. It's not my area.
Yeah.
But if you like it in biology, you're going to love the podcast.
But the religious Jews that I talk to, they say that the universe is about 5,780 something years old, right? So do you believe that or not?
Do I believe that? I
It's a
think
simple
that
question, like a yes or no would be nice.
right, right, okay.
Don't
I
be shy. Don't be ashamed to admit your worldview.
Right. No, I think that when the Torah, the Bible says the 6 days of creation, I think that those are eras. Those eras of
Oh, okay. Okay.
right. So no. So I think that it's clear to me from science that the universe the universe is older, and I don't feel a need to say that the 6 days of creation
Ah,
are 24-hour periods of time.
okay.
I know there are some Jews who think that you have to interpret the Bible in like a literalistic fashion. I know obviously a lot of Christians do too,
Yeah,
but I don't believe that's our tradition. Jews
yeah,
throughout the ages have been willing to take a verse in the Bible figuratively when it contradicts observations.
yeah,
So I'm part of that camp.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's probably the modern part of your
You know,
modern Orthodox.
modern Orthodox.
But I'm up here in Montreal. It's like ultra Orthodox Jews.
Yeah, they're
So
not going to say that. They're not going to say that. No.
yeah,
No, they're not. No, but it's again, it's. I would only. It's only to me. I'll accept um, clear evidence from science when it's really been established. The age of the universe that's older than 6,000 years has been. I'm sorry to offend any of your
no,
viewers
it doesn't.
yourself, but it's okay. Good. That's real science to show that it's older than 6,000 years. Um, and therefore I'll interpret the verses in the Bible as when it says a day, it means an era. There are other cases in the we call the Tanakh, or I guess you call the Old Testament, where you see the word day is used to refer to an era. The only time you ever have a problem the only real problem you can have with the contradiction between science and Judaism, the Torah, is if it undermines a fundamental tenet of Judaism. Like if science were to show that God didn't exist, or that miracles are impossible, um, or that there's no any of the that God has doesn't that there's no divine providence, or that the Torah wasn't given by God, prophecy is impossible. There's certain tenets about 13 Jews believe 13 tenets. Without if any of those tenets are proven wrong, the Judaism falls apart. But one of those, but you could imagine, you can see why if God doesn't exist, Judaism doesn't quite work, or if there's no such thing as prophecy, Judaism isn't going to work, or if without divine providence. But there's nothing about Judaism that requires that the world be 6,000 years old as opposed to 14 billion. The only reason is if you have a commitment to the literal interpretation of the Bible, which we have a tradition that you're committed to the interpretation of the Bible unless it contradicts reason, in which
yeah,
case
yeah,
you reconcile the two. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the. But
I
again,
agree with that. I
yeah.
agree with that in principle. It's just I think there are good reasons to abandon, the appear. There's no doubt. There's the appearance of long ages. That's for sure. But I don't want to dwell on this. I was just curious, and I sort of
And
I had to coax it out of you a little bit. But I want to move on now to science. Some of the scientific principles, which are really philosophical principles, which are being challenged today, and I'm very disappointed. Okay, in the modern physics, not the good solid empirical science, but more the philosophy that it's couched in and marketed with. But some assumptions that are being made that would never have passed muster 100 years ago. Things to do with causality, and it's largely because of the new physics, quantum physics, and relativity. It's partly because of that people have allowed themselves to question axiomatic principles and assumptions about the way that nature works. So I reject, for example, the uh, Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics and these sorts of things, and the all the statistical stuff, the probabilistic stuff, the wave function, and all that collapses into reality and all that. It's hard for the layman to distinguish hard science from the philosophical packaging. But there were geniuses on both sides of the philosophical questions. Okay, if you read the history of the new physics, there were geniuses on both sides of all these hairy questions, because it's a philosophical question at that point. Okay, we have the data, we have the results of all these experiments. How do we interpret it? What's the meaning? What's the how do we package this and understand this and make sense of this? So, I mean, I reject the Copenhagen interpretation. I believe that I do not believe in randomness. I do not believe in indeterminacy. I do not believe in you know um, luck or coincidence or these sorts of things. I do believe I do believe that there is a sufficient reason for everything that happens. It's called the principle of sufficient reason. It used to be enshrined by the natural sciences, and now it's it's under attack. You know, it's like the top scientists no longer believe in the principle of sufficient reason. They think that things can just pop out of nowhere, things just happen, and they're famous physicists writing books about how everything came from nothing, and they define nothing as a quantum field or something. Well, a quantum field is not nothing. I'm sorry. So I just want you to respond and react to some of these irritating developments that have happened since the turn of the last century.
Okay. Let me start with what I agree with you on first. You're definitely right about that last point. When I think you're referring to Stephen Hawking, when he said that nothing is unstable because of the laws of quantum mechanics. Like, for example, referring to the quantum uncertainty principle, where where you really can't have absolute nothing in a certain sense. You have absolute knowledge of a state of something, and that's impossible according to the laws of quantum mechanics. But obviously, it's not absolute nothing because you're starting with the laws of quantum mechanics. So, like you said, that no physicists really believe in absolute nothing. You get something. They believe that, for example, the laws of nature are eternal. And if you were to ask them where the laws of nature come from, they'll just say they're uncaused, they're necessary existence, they have to be there. I think Hawking writes about this. He said, question is what breathes fire gives life to these equations. But I know that's something we'll develop. We're not doing that in this season. We're going to do it on our third season, is showing how the idea of God, and it's really the classic idea of God, of one simple, the divine simplicity, the idea of the classic idea of God, how that really is the idea pointed, that the fine-tuning argument of physics really points to, and it's really the only clear, compelling, consistent, logical, defensible idea of God. And we're going to do that in a using modern categories of science, showing how the very categories that scientists use to understand physics in fundamental physics, you can show how those ideas really, through analogy, can transfer to God. So this is one example. We're going to do that. Scientists themselves, like if you ask this, scientists say, "What caused God?" But that's one of the questions they ask. But they'll admit, they'll understand that what caused quantum mechanics, what caused general relativity, whatever they believe to be their ultimate unified theory of everything, whatever it is. If you were to ask them, well, what caused that? They'll just say it exists. So they acknowledge the idea of a fundamental axiom, a principle from which everything else follows. And they understand that you have to begin with that, or else you get into an infinite regress. So you're absolutely right. Is that saying that quantum mechanics tells you, because of the uncertainty principle, that nothing is unstable, and that's how you get a universe, ultimately is not really saying something from nothing. It's saying something from quantum mechanics. That you're absolutely right about. In terms of the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, as you know, there are multiple interpretations of quantum mechanics. The Copenhagen interpretation is, by Bohr and Heisenberg. There really is, everybody, there's no great solution to how to understand quantum mechanics. Obviously, Einstein, who I'm sure you're referring to, was very much against the Copenhagen interpretation. So was Schrodinger, and they were great thinkers. I myself, I don't know. This is the formalism of quantum mechanics. Its mathematical structure is beautiful. It's amazing. It clearly works. It is far and away the best theory ever devised by science in terms of prediction and accuracy. It's even better, in terms of measuring certain quantities. It's even better than, I think, general relativity in terms of accuracy. Maybe with black holes, they've been able to do something more with general relativity. I'm not sure, but quantum mechanics is amazing. I happen to think the ideas it shows about causality are wonderful. They're amazing. It just shows you that that God, in His wisdom, is able to dumbfound the greatest minds of humanity, and it's just the wisdom of God in the universe is beyond our ability to think about. And I think that our ideas of deterministic causality I think quantum mechanics does show that that doesn't. That's probably not correct. It's probably there's a different idea of causality that's deeper than just what we thought was the case.
Right, but I want to push back a little bit here because I've discussed this many, many times with many people, some of whom were physicists, and the fact that you said yourself that quantum physics is one of the most reliable sciences that we've come up with, it proves my point. We don't know case by case. We can't predict. Yeah, sure, okay, but we have to say high reliability is an understatement. Okay, like we know, for example, that the wave function, that curve, that classic curve we see, like typically we see a bell-shaped curve, just as a simple example. We know that gets fulfilled if we do a sufficient number of experiments, and so it's a statistical science, yeah, because we can't peer into the individual cases and know the position and momentum or whatever it is of the given particle. But the fact is that as an aggregate, it's reliable, it's predictable, and it is determined. I'm sorry to say, it is determined, and people want to say there's indeterminacy, but that's only and there are
What about indeterminacy? Why do you feel threatened by that idea? What is that? What is
because
that?
it undermines the principle of causality. We have to have a sufficient reason for everything that happens. And I think, I mean, call me silly, but I think that God is active in what's happening on the quantum level, and his angels are probably, given the task of
What
playing
if I
around
were
with
to,
this.
what if I were to show you that if you had classical determinism,
Yeah,
like Newtonian physics, believed in,
yeah,
if you had that kind of the classic laws of physics, atoms wouldn't be stable. You can have atoms, but if you had, if the world works by quantum mechanics with a probabilistic type of causality, it's not pure randomness. It's not like anything happens. Like you said, there's a bell curve. There's a
yeah,
specific rules
yeah,
of the probabilistic distribution. That if the universe works that way, then you have atoms and you can have planets and you can have
yeah.
life emerge when you get to higher levels.
I
Isn't
understand
that
that. I understand that. I believe that. I subscribe to that. But my thinking is that because in the aggregate and with that bell curve having been fulfilled, if we move backwards through time in a thought experiment, then the last electron fulfilled this part of the curve, and the second to last one fulfilled that part of the curve, and we can predict with 100% certainty if we move backwards in time. We can predict with absolute certainty each and every jot and tittle of this wave function. It's only when we're moving forward through time that we can't predict it. But if we go backwards in time, we analyze it. There's no choice. Like that last little jot on the graph, it's not going to go somewhere else. It's going to fulfill the curve.
I know you're never gonna debating quantum mechanics. These things have been debated for the past century. Obviously, it's a shocking idea of causality. Some people are willing to hear it, some people aren't. In terms of the principle of sufficient reason, if you can show the value of why the universe works this way, there's sufficient reason for God to make it work this way, if that's really necessary in order to get the universe that
Yeah,
God wants.
yeah.
So, but again, I understand
It's
obviously the
shrouded
problem.
in mystery. Okay, it is
It's
shrouded
a
in
difficult area.
mystery. It's
No
shrouded in
question.
mystery. We have to accept that. We have to accept, and it's humbling. We have to humble ourselves and say, well, we can't
Right.
we can't know
Exactly.
everything. But to say that there's an uncaused effect is nonsense. I'm sorry, that's complete nonsense. And I'm not angry at you. I'm just angry generally at the way the modern world has gone, because it's largely secular and godless, and they hate God. But I just want to
But
ask
that's
you.
not the problem. That's not the problem. Okay, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh,
Go
a friend,
ahead.
a friend in the live chat is asking, and this is very important to me, if you believe in the universal flood and not the story of Noah.
Yeah, I believe in the
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
So,
okay.
right,
So it seems like you're very amenable to, the book of what we call Genesis, and that story of creation that's told. And
right, correct. Now, I whether now I don't believe necessarily that happened in Australia.
Uh-huh.
Like I think there were Aborigines people who are living there, and I don't think they were killed in the flood. So I think it was
It wasn't universal. It wasn't like a universal catastrophe that
right,
you don't
correct. I don't
think
think
there, you don't believe there were only 8 survivors. You believe there were tons of
right. I
people on the
believe
earth.
in the world at that time, the whole population that Noah and his children were able to interact with were completely wiped out. They were able to have a restart civilization without having to be concerned with anybody else. But I don't believe that people in Australia were killed in the flood.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I didn't know you
Okay.
did universal. Universal. I believe in the flood story, but
Okay.
and Noah, but not that it
But
happened
you
across.
believe it was a local flood?
Yeah, local, but more than just a local
A
flood.
big,
Enough to wipe out.
big local flood.
Yeah, something along those lines. We're killing. Right,
Uh, that sounds like you're
correct.
calling God a liar. He said no, there would never ever be a flood like that again. But there've been lots of big local floods.
Your problem is that you're saying God shouldn't. No, but that's wiped out the entire civilization. Like literally to the point where for hundreds of years they didn't interact with anybody else um, besides their family and descendants. I don't think that's happened again.
Okay.
I think there's a
S-
difference between a local flood of like a little local country and what that was.
Uh, uh. All right. Well, I'm just jabbing you a little bit. Don't take it personally.
I'm sorry to your listener. I'm sorry to your listener. But
Pushback.
again, it's just the principle. The principle that we work with is that if it contradicts a fundamental tenet
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
of of religion, where you can't maintain religion, then you say that's a real problem. But if it's simply the question of the literal interpretation, then there's no commitment. There's no absolute commitment to literal interpretation.
I want to change the subject if it's
Okay,
okay
go
with you.
ahead.
I want to change the subject. I want to talk about. I got rapid fire questions. They're all controversial. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
But I want to talk about first of all the family. Jews are known for valuing family and putting family first, and Jews have a reputation for all kinds of things, but that's one of the good things they have a reputation for. I want to talk about abortion, pornography, and some of the things that are undermining the family. Do you have strong opinions about that sort of demonic stuff that's taking over the world?
I don't know if I would say I have strong opinions. Like again, are about the family.
Are you pro-life in the sense of anti-abortion? Are you anti-abortion the way that I am?
Am I anti-abortion? I think yes. I don't know what you are.
I
I
don't like
think
abortion.
right. I'm assuming that. I guess that's what you meant. I think yeah. I think abortion. I definitely think abortion. The question is when. I definitely think if it's viable, it's killing. I don't know if you can. I guess the question for me would be in how you would show it in a secular world, like in America, where would you be able to show philosophically that it's wrong when it's just, let's say, like
Single cell.
stem cells, things like that. So I think that I think there's a difference between if you're coming at it from where God's giving you a law, which is why I would say I'm against it, because certain things I think can't be proven philosophically, but you accept it based upon, for example, the Torah. I think if a society accepted the 7 laws of Noah, then I think that's also justification for why abortion would be wrong and killing, and you can't do that. I just don't think in America, the reality is America is a secular there's a separation of church and state, and the American Constitution is not founded on the 7 laws of Noah. So I think you have to, in terms of abortion, you have to
Pragmatic.
think about America in its own framework, and in its own framework, can you show philosophically when life started? I think that's a complicated issue, purely based on philosophy and reason. So I think without bringing in tradition, which I do believe in, for myself, for my family, and anybody who accepts the 7 laws of Noah, that's obviously then it would be killing. But I just don't know if it's reasonable to say America should do that when America doesn't accept the fact that God commanded the 7 laws of Noah to all the people of the world. If they don't accept that fact, then you can't quite say we'll accept abortion.
Yeah. The friend in the live chat saying, what does the Talmud say about abortion?
I think the Talmud says that would be killing.
Oh, okay. And what does the Talmud say about the age of creation?
The age of creation.
Yeah,
It's a good question. Does the Talmud discuss that? Like how old?
I'm sure it would, but I'll look it up because I bought the Babylonian one. Is that a good one? The one that I bought, even though it's an English translation. Do you think that's
The Babylonian Talmud, yes.
it's a good one?
Yeah, I mean, in the one of the things to know, if you're is that um, there are different. I mean,
Schools.
good luck finding it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if the Talmud specifically addresses it. You know,
My next controversial question was about anti-Semitism. The reason I bought the Talmud is because I've just been hearing so much nasty stuff about the Talmud, right? And I don't want to just say, yeah, Jews bad. So I went and got the Talmud so I can actually fact check. But there's a lot of stuff in there about pedophilia, allegedly, and all this sort of things. Like it's okay with a 3-year-old, and it's like if you put your
I don't think that's
I'm
true.
gonna fact check all this stuff, but generally, my question to you is about anti-Semitism. I mean, and that's I don't really like that word personally. I would just say hatred towards Jews. That's
Right.
a better way of saying it. Okay,
Much
more
better. Yeah, I agree.
clear. So what's your perspective? What's your perspective on that? Kind of a silly question, but I'm curious what you
About Jew
think.
hatred. About Jew hatred.
Yeah.
Um, I think what Jew hatred is. I think it's different than other forms of bigotry. I think it's more pathological. It really is. I really think it's something that deals with the unconscious of mankind. You see how pervasive it is throughout different societies and different cultures and throughout history. How they hated Jews because Jews were communists, because Jews were capitalists, because Jews were socialists, because Jews were because Jews were rich, because Jews are poor. Jews, it's if everybody hates Jews for a different reason. It's been going on for thousands of years. So I don't think it's based upon any conscious reasoning. I think a lot of mankind has a part of them that hates Jews. I think it's part of the collective unconscious of mankind, and it's pathological. It develops in certain societies to a different degree, like in Nazi Germany or with Hamas and Hezbollah in Iran in the current day today. That's like a little bit of a different level where they're willing to sacrifice their own existence in order to kill Jews. That's where the pathology is really completely taken over the human being entirely. But that's basically my thoughts. You have to recognize the unconscious source of anti-Semitism and realize that it can develop into a different level of existence, which we're seeing now in Hamas, like we saw 80 years ago.
Have you ever met a Jew hater? You met one in real life?
Have I ever met a
Someone
Jew
who
hater
hates
in real
someone
life?
who hates you because you're Jewish.
Yeah, when I was trading commodities, there were people who would, insult me when I was trading there. They wouldn't trade with me because I was Jewish. So yeah, I mean that's not that long ago, and that was in New York. So I definitely have encountered it. Yeah.
Wow. And so because the reason I ask is I was curious, is it evident in an individual or is it a group think thing where it's like, no, I don't hate Jews, but they're part of a group that hates Jews and it's sort of like a group thing that's not really manifest in the individual, but you're making it sound like individuals are walking around with a manifest hatred as individuals?
Oh, what's your question? What's the
Well,
question?
because there's a sort of a group hive mind where we could have a systemic racism, but in this organization there's systemic racism. For example, they don't hire blacks or whatever, but you interview each and every member of this corporation, and you can't find the individual that's racist. It's a systemic thing that's built into this thing, and it's sort of like a hive mind group think that put in this systemic racism. They don't hire black people, but no individual is aware of it, and no individual has rancor towards the black people. But it's just something that arises in the group. It's emergent
Right,
from this group. So I was
right.
wondering if Jew haters, if it goes down to the resolution of the individual Jew hater, where they're actually consciously hating Jews, or if it's more of a systemic virus that's sort of floating around in groups But you're making it sound like it's in the individuals too.
I mean, I think it's both. It's both. I think I think most people in America who are anti-Semitic, hate Jews, um, either on the extreme left or on the extreme right. I think most of them are just they're just they're uneducated. They're just following the group. They don't really think for themselves. I think that's largely the case with most of them. But there are the leaders of these movements. They know what they're doing, and they're just there's an evil in their soul that causes them to again I think it's an unconscious source, but they're still responsible for what they say and what they do. So I think it's there are individuals, but I think there are individuals. I think it's both. I think
Yeah.
there are individuals who hate Jews, and there becomes a group mentality of Jew hatred.
Are you, as a Jew, does your religion allow you to hate any creature, for example, a human? Are you allowed to hate humans or no?
Oh yeah, we hate evil. We those who love God hate evil. It's in Psalms.
I know, but the person you as Christians we hate the sin, but we love the sinner. So if someone were to, God forbid, take someone's child and torture and rape and kill it, the Christian would have to love that person that did that, but hate obviously the sin that they did. Is that this doesn't resonate with you as a Jew? The distinction between sin and sinner?
I recognize the fact that there's a time where evil so takes over a person's personality. A Nazi or Hamas is where evil takes over the personality, where there's no human being left. They've been completely consumed by the evil, and there's no longer. They've destroyed them soul. They've
Oh,
destroyed their
really?
soul. Yeah, that happens. There's such a
Wow.
thing that can happen.
Wow.
Specifically, I mean, you see it. Nazis are the greatest expression of it in the modern era, but you see it in the modern day where people are willing to, or Hamas, they're willing to kill destroy themselves just for the sake of killing Jews. So I do think that there is such a thing as where real evil person becomes the embodiment of evil, and then I hate them. I do hate evil. I love good
Oh.
and I hate evil. So yeah.
Oh, wow, that's quite different from the Christian perspective because we say we say that you can become depraved and indulge in your selfishness, but you don't cease to be human, and you're going to be judged by God as a human. You're gonna be liable for everything that you do. You can't use the excuse, well, that wasn't during my human phase. That was during my Nazi beast phase. You know what I mean?
Like if you want a Nazi is obviously they're a human being, but the good part of humanity has been removed from their soul. They
Okay.
become consumed
Okay.
by evil. I mean, I'm not saying they're not a human.
Okay.
They're the
Okay.
most dangerous type of human out there. They're an
Yeah.
evil human who's capable of the greatest evil.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
important. I think it's important to hate that and to destroy that and to so again, I know you have a
Yeah.
different view, but for me, it's important to hate and destroy something that's purely
Yeah, yeah,
evil.
yeah. There's a righteous anger we have to have as Christians. It's actually
Right.
it's lacking in our modern Christian society. We're sort of timid and nice, But yeah, definitely, there should be a manly opposition to evil and those who do evil for sure. Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with you. Just don't look to me to be the first one to grab the pitchfork. 'Cause, like I'm not I'm not going to be the one probably. Yeah. So yeah, it's very funny. Some of the other Jewish stereotypes are, that you're racist. You only like Jews. You don't like non-Jews. They love money. You're funny. You're intelligent. So maybe just address some of those stereotypes, the good ones and the bad ones.
I think Jews come all different types of Jews. Again, like people hate Jews because they have money, hate Jews because they're poor. There's all different types of Jews. So if you want to hate Jews, you'll find a reason to hate Jews. Um, it comes from the unconscious. That's important to recognize. So it's just these are rationalizations and justifications for why a person might hate a Jew. In terms of Jews, it is ultimately, yeah, we are one nation, and we are there's something special about being a Jew, and we're proud of that. of who we are, but we love humanity. And the ultimate objective of Judaism is to spread the idea of one God, one simple God who, is the master of the universe, to all humanity. And our vision of the end of days is where the whole world is unified in peace and harmony, and accepts the idea of God. So there's no hatred towards mankind or humanity at all. Again, evil is a different thing, but for humanity as a whole, our vision is ultimately one world where Jews and non-Jews live together and accept the idea of the one God of the universe.
Why are there so many secular Jews, atheist Jews, and they're very talented and funny, many of them, and we see them all over the place. But they don't believe in God. They don't worship God. Like, I mean, it's just, I find that weird. I just find that really weird. I mean, I could point to my Christian brothers and sisters, and a lot of them are just culturally Christian. So maybe it's just the pot calling the kettle black here. But why so many secular Jews?
I really think that you have to look to when it started. It started a few hundred years ago, and it's the crisis of modernity. It's
Okay,
this. It's
faith
this
versus reason, faith versus reason, and reason
I
is
think
winning.
that's
Reason's winning.
it has a big impact on people. And that's why we have Physics to God. We had the podcast because we want people to realize that there is a rational justification for God. And I do think a lot of Jews don't believe that. They think they're being forced. If you make people choose between their mind and their religion, some people are going to choose their mind, and I think that's a false choice. And that's one of that's our main goal, is to show people you can be an integrated human being. You don't have to be dichotomized. You can accept your mind and the idea of God, and you don't and you want to resolve the crisis of modernity and allow people to exist in the modern world and still believe in God. So I think that's why I made the podcast.
Thank you for that. I do love and admire the Jews, and I worship a Jew, Jesus Christ, who I believe is the Jewish Messiah. I mean, that's my main critique of Judaism, is that they rejected their own Messiah. But obviously you don't agree. But
Obviously,
the I believe that the Jews were set apart, made holy by God to be the priestly people for all the nations. And what you're saying today to me, that you Jewish people are taking care of humanity and trying to have this future where we come back to God. And I think that's why you were chosen. I think that's why you were chosen as the chosen people by God, not because you're good or not because you're better, but because you were set apart for that task, that responsibility, that burden, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the role of the Jewish people, we do lead a different way of life, a life through the commandments, the 613 commandments. But the purpose of that is to have one nation which is able to testify to the world about the miracles that were done for us in the Exodus. If we have a continuous tradition and a transmission of those miracles, and how would the world know about the miracles if the Jews weren't there telling their children every year at the Passover, um, Passover, meal, about it year after year. Fathers telling their sons, mothers telling their daughters how about these miracles. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do, with our podcast, is to tell the world about the idea of God, and that's, we think, is the role what Jews have been set aside to do, and we're trying to do that. We think Abraham did that. He went around to people in the world and tried to make arguments to show them that God exists, and to show the um, pagan philosophy is incorrect. I think modern day multiverse scientists is just it's what we're trying to do is break that down and show that that's a false worldview, and there is a true idea of one God, and that's, I think, is within realizing the role of Jews in the world.
It's a bit controversial even among Christians. There were split. There's a split in among Christians about Zionism. I'm firmly anti-Zionist. I'm against the modern state of Israel. I don't think it was a good move, and I don't think that God ordained that. And there's some Jews here in Montreal who agree. They think that God put you in exile. What are you doing? Forcing His hand with this political move. So I mean, I'm not a Jew hater. I love the Jews, but I'm against the formation of the modern state of Israel. I don't think it's going too well. Now, my atheist and agnostic friends disagree with me. They're like, "What are you talking about? This is like a miracle. Look at all how they transformed the land and this and that and the other thing." And I always just bring it back to the colonial, like, sort of slaughter of the Amerindian people. It's like, yeah, we got cell phones and iPhones and high technology and highways and all this sort of thing, but we mistreated the people that were here, that we found here, right? So I sort of see it in the same way. I know there are differences, significant, real differences, and I know it's a long history, complicated history. And I'm not saying the Jews are the bad guys and the Muslims are the good guys. I'm not saying that, but when it comes to sort of like pushing people aside, I've seen it here in North America. I'm not too happy with it. My atheist and agnostic friends thinks that might makes right. Okay, you had the power, you had the strength, you had the technology, and you just turned the swamp into a paradise. They think that's justification. I don't think that's justification. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as a Jew.
Okay, I'd say two things. One is it's actually a similar point to the quantum mechanics point. Is that I think you have to realize that you don't know how God, the creator of the universe, should act. And you can't really dictate to God how he should do it. So you might think that God should bring back the Jews in a different way.
I think they should have come to Saskatchewan. That was one plan that was on the table. Like, that was a plan, and I think that would have been much better. Much better. There's so much room. There's so much space.
Right. Madagascar was an option there. So yeah, but it's not for me to tell God how he should have brought back the ingathering of the exiles. If he brought it back through this way, is it surprising that it happened in this way? Yes, but it's been happening for Jews that were in exile for 2,000 years, scattered to the four corners of the world, and now Jews are gathering back into Israel. It is remarkable to me that is happening. You can call it a miracle if you like. It is something that, in a historical sense, it's shocking. If you have a certain historical perspective, you can see it's really a shocking, amazing thing. And it's not for me to determine, is God doing it how God should do it. I don't know. It's not. I don't know. I can see. I do see it happening.
Yeah.
Whether it should happen a different way or not is beyond me. So that's why it's similar to the quantum mechanics point. It's God is wiser beyond me. Maybe.
Yeah.
The other point.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And the other thing in terms of taking the land from other people, I think it's fundamental that it's the Jews were on the land. I guess Muslims and Arabs might not agree with this, but it's pretty well accepted historically by everybody. There's tons of archaeological evidence. 2,000 years ago, our temple, the second temple, was destroyed. There's so much evidence that we were there 2,000 years ago. It's not something that we are making up. I know, Arabs there think the whole thing is made up, but 600 years before Muhammad was born, the Jewish temple, the second temple, was destroyed, and we were driven into exile by the Romans. So it's our land. We're not coming and taking. We're not a bunch of Europeans coming and taking land from Arabs. This was our land before Muslims even existed. This is our land. We are the indigenous people of this land, and that land was colonized by others. It's our land. No other people has a claim to the land from thousands of years ago besides us. The whole thing is it's ludicrous to call Jews colonizers when we are the indigenous people coming back to a land where there is an abundance of archaeological evidence that this was our land thousands of years ago, and we're returning.
Yeah.
So
I take your point there. I just I think you should have slaughtered every man, woman, child, and animal like God told you to do when you took the land of Canaan. I think things would have played out better for you guys. Anyway, people are asking in the live chat, are you interested in building the third temple? Will your Messiah come in your lifetime, in this generation? What's up with that? And the red heifer, what's up?
Look, the reality is, I don't know. I just like I don't know.
Tell us, please. Tell us.
Exactly. I don't know why God chose to do things in this way. And ultimately, will this result in in Messiah coming and the third temple being built? I don't know. I mean, ultimately, yes, we believe that the first temple was built on the Temple Mount. The second temple was built on the Temple Mount, and we think the third temple will be built on the Temple Mount. And obviously, that is um, the core issue with Muslims. They don't want to see the third temple built on the Temple Mount, and we do. Whether that'll happen in my day, whether it happen in 100 years in the future, 1,000 years in the future, it's beyond me to know. I don't know. I believe it will happen at some point in the future. Um,
Oh,
and
speaking of the future, for most, what do you call them, conservative or ultra Orthodox Jews or whatever that I talk to, they say that all of creation is only going to last 6,000 years. So we're very close to the end, right? So, but you don't believe that. You don't subscribe to that. So maybe humans will last for millions of years into the
right,
future, according to
yeah.
you. According to you, I think that's a silly idea. But do you think that it's possible it could drag on for millions of years? Oh my God! Please no, no, please no,
Humans can exist for millions of years
no. We've had enough. We've had
of,
enough.
of humanity. Yeah, I don't see why there has to be an end to humanity. I don't think why there has to be.
Oh really? There's no end?
Why it has to end?
Well, in your Judaism, is there like a happy ending or no? Because like from Christianity's point of view, it's like there was a beginning. We messed up. We fell from grace. With the fall of Adam and Eve, and then the rest is the salvation history, a story of redemption. The God Man came and redeemed us, and we have this good news that we can accept His salvation, and so on and so forth. And then at the end time, there'll be a flood of fire, not a local flood, but a universal flood, and then a new heaven, new earth, and we'll be enjoying the life of the Trinity in heaven. That's a Christian perspective. What did the
Right.
Jews say?
I don't know what I'm not here to debate the religious eschatology. I don't know, and ultimately I don't know, and we'll see when it happens. It's not something that we have certain knowledge.
Oh,
Um,
okay. There's no definite teaching in Judaism, generally speaking. The Talmud doesn't talk about the end times or anything.
what we do know is there will be a messianic era, which
Okay.
will have peace and the knowledge of God will proliferate in the world.
Okay. Okay.
That much we know. How
Oh.
long it'll last, I don't. There's certainly nothing that it can't last forever.
Oh,
There's
okay.
definitely different opinions by different people, but
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think there's anything that's like absolutely conclusive where we could say we have true knowledge
Uh,
through prophecy one way or the other.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I kept you a little bit longer than the hour, but when I do have a Jew on, I like to ask some very pointed, specific questions because it's not every day that I get to have a Jewish guest. Most of my guests are Christian, and I drill
Well,
them on other things. I drill them. But you've been a good sport. You've been a very good sport, and I appreciate. I hope it didn't make you feel awkward with
no, no
everything that I
problem, David.
said. And I do hope you'll invite your friend, your partner on the podcast to come on and just chat to me. And uh,
For
don't
sure.
don't scare him away. Don't scare him away. Tell him it was fine. Tell him it was
No, look,
fine.
I enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate the questions, and like it's clear that you're genuinely curious and you're just trying to understand different perspectives, and I can
Yeah,
appreciate where you're coming from. And look, you realize that is Jews. There are different perspectives. I'm offering you one that I believe. Again, this is not something that this is not something that we speak about on the podcast because it's a lot of the other questions you asked me beyond the physics and the philosophy. It's like it's debatable. There are other questions. So I tried to
yeah,
answer them
yeah.
as the best I could. The core ideas of Judaism we all agree to, but a lot of the questions you asked me are beyond like the core ideas, and that's
Of
why
course.
there's differences of opinions. So I
Yeah,
gave you one of them, but you're obviously right. There are ultra orthodox Jews who would say different things in some of those questions.
absolutely. Appreciate you rolling with the punches, and hope you had an okay time. And we'll be in touch. We'll see each other on pod match. And I asked if you're on Twitter. You said you're not really on Twitter so much.
We have a Facebook group called Physics to God if you want
Oh,
to join us in social media.
okay,
So,
okay.
that would be a good place. And yeah, and that's mostly on social media where we are on Facebook group.
Very cool. So nice to meet you. God bless you. I hope you're going to pray for me and mine. Is that something that you're in the habit of praying for people, non-Jews?
We pray for the whole world. We pray for the entire world, for Jews and non-Jews. We have holidays, devoted towards praying for humanity. New Year. So
what's the next high holiday for you guys?
The next high holiday, high holiday specifically refers to the New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. The next major holiday would be Passover.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, so high holiday is specifically just for.
That's how people use the term. I don't know. So yeah,
Okay.
Passover is the next major holiday.
Yeah. What's one of the more minor, really minor, almost neglected holidays for Jews?
More minor, almost neglected. I don't know if there's any ones that are quite neglected. A more minor one would be like Tu B'Shvat. I think it's coming up relatively soon. It's the idea of recognizing the annual cycle of trees, how God is the source of plant-led tree life and fruits, and our sustenance is ultimately dependent upon Him. So that's coming up relatively soon, I think.
Okay, and what do you do? What do you do as a family?
There's not tremendous amount. I think there's a blessing, some people might say, when you see the trees blossom, appreciating that it comes from God. Not sure if that's around Tu B'Shvat. Some people, eat different fruits, special fruits, and they say a blessing if it's like an annual thing. But it's more recognizing the idea of our dependency on God and how He's the source of fruits and trees and things like that.
What's your favorite Jewish food that's a stereotypically Jewish food?
My favorite Jewish food.
Bagel.
I like bagel, lox, and cream cheese. That's pretty stereotypical.
Do you eat bacon? Because I know a lot of Jews that eat bacon.
No bacon, no pig, nothing.
What do you think of a Jew who eats bacon? That's pretty bad.
There's worse things out there, but but I mean it's certainly against the law.
Yeah, it's against the.
But there's definitely worse things.
We had little, I think they're called knishes, potato. They're like a little moon-shaped.
Yeah, knishes. Okay.
What is it? Potato knish?
A potato knish, yeah.
They're good.
Very good.
Why is it so good? I mean, what's in it? Really, very good. We have good food. We have good food in our little Jewish community up here. Hopefully you'll get to come up and to visit Montreal sometime and give me a dingle. We'll go for a coffee. So nice to meet you. God bless you. I'm gonna be praying for you and yours, and invite your friend on, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you. Bye bye.
You too.